And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Stephan Liozu. He should be familiar to many of you guys, but for those of you who don't, he's Chief Value Officer at Zilliant, and he has over 30 years of experience in the industrial sector and beyond, spearheading pricing transformations, pricing ROI, and value-based pricing. So you'll hear a lot more from him. So with that, Stephan.
All right. Hello, everyone. All right. Okay. Hello, I'm Stephan, and I'm pleased to spend time with you today. And as you know, I worry about theory, but I also worry about application in real life, operationalizing what we do so that it makes an impact to our organizations. So as such, there is quite a bit of content being produced and communicated to the world about customer value management, value propositions, all the way to value-based selling. But you know, the end goal of this presentation here today is to really focus on how do we tie this up? How do we integrate all of this into a process that really helps the sales team sell on value, and then obviously manage the objections from procurement team. So key word in that title here is operationalizing. So I'm going to go through a couple slides of refresher for some of you who don't know the concepts fully. And the number one thing that we have to think about is the definition of value. What is customer value? In any organization, you will find that the definition of value varies. There might be 3 or 4 definition of value internally. So it's always good to refresh what people think about value. And I like that definition from Anderson and Nares from the 90s. It's a long time ago, but 2 key words in that definition is the worth, perceived worth, and then the word exchange, which is always what I try to focus on to make things simple internally, in the exchange between value and price. So what we do with value is we exchange benefits of our solution, and then at the end, these benefits turn into a price that the customer should be willing to pay. So it's that exchange between value and price that is the heart of value-based pricing and in general, value-based strategies. So back to value-based strategies, when you look at this sequence here, we go through the go-to-market process between innovation and marketing and pricing and selling, right? So this is a natural progression. Usually we put product management within marketing. So there might be a couple more blocks in that chain. And then on top of these go-to-market functions, you will superpose the value management process, value creation, value quantification, and value capture. But what that shows is that integration that I mentioned before. A lot of the time we'll do things in silos, like very good value props, and then they'll stay with marketing and maybe not fully updated for sales. We'll do value models in pricing that are maybe not that connected to the value props, and then the value messages are not very convincing or not using the quantified work that we did in the pricing side. So it's really an integration of the 2 processes, but also a value discipline throughout the go-to-market function. And you'll see in what I published is usually I recommend that you just can't do one of the blocks without doing the others. It doesn't bring the end goal, which is impact for customers and impact for your organization. So along the way of the value management process, the CVM process, these 3 buckets here, you will produce assets, what I call the tools, right? For in creation, you will do a new business model, you will create statement of differentiation, you may map some digital innovations in terms of value chain or the process of value management in the ecosystem. In the quantification side, you'll do your typical EVE models, the value models. You might do some ROI calculators, and then maybe a TCO analysis. Those are the outcome will be assets, whether it's a spreadsheet or a presentation or some kind of recording. In these activities, you will produce something for the sales guys to use. And in the capture, you will have your pricing tactics, your selling guidelines, your price realization corridors, and all that stuff, right? So imagine all these documents, assets being produced, and all of these in order to operationalize your value-based strategies. So, and some of the value assets, I call them value tools, could be scorecards, journals, stories, documented value props, internal value models, external quantified value props. So there is a list of, I created a list of 55 value assets that you can use. That's a lot, but this is what I've experienced in the last 15 years as I'm doing more and more value-based strategies, including for my current firm, Zillion. And at the end of the day, it's all about having the right tools for what you need to accomplish, your goals, and what the sales team needs. They may need a value discovery guide, or they may need a value booklet, but this is something that you decide as a team. And really, it's all about accelerating sales velocity and being able to resist the price discount request. So keep that in mind. I call those the value tools or the value assets. Now, do you use those in value-based selling? That's the ultimate outcome, right? So you negotiate for value and you value-based sell. So you'll use value selling sheets, standardized value prop. You will have documented pricing objections with the responses. You have critical value messages, some success stories. So, I mean, it could be rich. And then you use these tools to train your sales force. And you do kind of a different, maybe progressive training programs where they have a chance to role play and do some exercises together. All right, this is what we typically read in literature, in consulting reports. So nothing new if you've been in the value space for a while. So it's good. It's a lot of the time it's theoretical. It's perceived as theoretical. And as you see on that slide here, there might be some issues. So the number one is most of the time, these assets are too internally focused, right? We spend a lot of time internally doing this, and maybe we don't go outside and talk enough to customers or bring the side of the market in your work. Number two is, and I see that a lot, is very, very product or feature oriented. We forget that we have to speak to the customers, and then we speak in terms of features in our value assets, but not in terms of benefits. And as you know, when you do the value modeling work, you have to turn your differentiators for your product and features and turn them into customer benefits and eventually value drivers. They might be inconsistent between product line, region, product managers, sales managers. They do their own work, and there's not one way, systematic way of doing things. And then you see different quality of value tools, value assets, and the outcome is not standardized. So that's a bit of an issue when you try to all achieve the same goals, like value realization or price realization. You might see some differences among the regions and your population. Then we get into the language, right? So we're not putting ourselves in the shoes of the customer and not using the vocabulary of the customer. And you'll be surprised how many companies, for some of the professionals, it is very difficult to switch and put themselves in the life of customers. And that's what is the heart of all the value work that we do, from value props to value model to value conversation. We have to live and breathe daily life of customers. So another problem is these tools are static in PowerPoint, Excel, and Word documents. This is why you would use a platform like Leverage Point, or maybe staying away from PowerPoint and Excel, because as soon as this is on your hard drive, how do you know who has the latest version, who is supposed to update it? You put that on SharePoint, and then either it stays there without being used, or people take it and do their own things with it. Maybe nothing wrong with it, but then you want to control a little bit of the branding, the content, and the systematic look of your assets. They may be too generic, so you don't do those as far as the segment for strategic accounts or for regions. And you may have to adapt this, but a generic value prop or a generic value model brings very little value. It may be good to hook some prospects with general messages, so you could have deep conversation with them, but at the end of the day, it may not be that compelling or convincing. And then second to last is, rarely they are tested. Value props or value model are tested and validated with customers, so they stay, inside with the internal voice, and then we're not going out to have discussions or at least testing plan, formal testing plan. So you'll see in the methodology of value prop, you do have testing cards to look at validating some numbers, validating some assumptions, hypotheses. It's not very well done. And finally, we're not training the salespeople with these tools that are validated, customer focused, using the language of the customer. And, we might be using more product data sheets or maybe light version of the selling sheets with benefits. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of work to be done. And usually this is a huge barrier to adopting all these value assets at the end of what we do, which is in selling, in having conversations with customers. And here I want to clearly say conversations are not, delivering just presentation. It's really engaging in deep, intimate conversations around the outcome of the customer, the pains that we're trying to solve, how much is that costing them, and how we can help them doing this. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of that sequence, because I've done that many, many times with a variety of customers. And really, you need to look at the integration. I call that the value sequence, but you do the homework in multifunctional teams, and you make sure all these pieces of work are integrated. You start with the customer pains and gains. What are they trying to solve? What is, on a daily business? What are they, experiencing, right? In parallel, you work on your wow differentiators. What makes you truly unique in the market? And then you tie them. This is what I call value mapping. You look at the integration of your differentiators with the top pains and gains of your customers. And that really is the heart of your value prop, right? Because you want to have differentiators that are extremely connected to the customer. I usually call that pain-centric, right? So you have that value map. Then you turn your differentiator into value drivers, which is when you do the EVE, the value model. And then all that stuff feeds into your value playbook that is then used in sales and sales enablement. So you can see here on that sequence that many people are involved. Many functions need to be involved, and you got to break down the silos. And really, usually that's what a value manager would do. So if we have product manager in the room here today or watching these session, you need to be acting like value managers. A product manager is a value manager when you move towards value orientation. So the step number one is set the context for the work, right? So you're going to do this for maybe a strategic customer, a segment, a region, right? A set of customers. But it's important to have all these things defined as you think about the sequence, right? So you may decide to do this for a system, for a product range, for a solution. So again, you may have to repeat that, remember. So now let's say I'm going to do that for North America, the segment of value buyers in oil and gas, and I'm going to focus on the system, right? Then you're going to say, well, who do I compete against in that context? Well, it will be, I have two direct competitors and maybe a startup coming up, right? And then I'm going to think about the unit of analysis and the time of analysis. So all the things that I'm going to do, I'm going to think in terms of per system and per year, per contract. So that sets the stage, because all your work in the sequence will be done in that context, right? And then you set up a sprint depending on your speed of working and the availability of people. You will do that in 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes I've done it in 2, sometimes a little bit longer. It depends on the maturity of your people. It depends on how much customer intimacy you have. And I've done this with teams that already had talked to customers. They had done research and qualitative interviews, so it was super fast. Others were, we need to take a break between the session, and I would tell them, go talk to some customers and come back. So here, session 1 was setting the stage. Then we go into what's called the value proposition. And here, I use the strategizer methodology. If you don't know about it, look at the work from Alex Osterwalder, and there's great books around business model innovation and then the value proposition canvas. And this is a representation of the canvas. And in that customer profile here, which is one side of the value prop canvas, you really focus on the pains and gains, right? What are the bad outcomes, risks, and obstacles that the customers are facing? What are we trying to reduce, the pains? And what are we trying to optimize, the gains, right? What are we trying to achieve as far as positive contribution? So, you know, I highly recommend you spend time reading about this. There's lots of documents available in PDF and videos on YouTube on how to do good value props. The goal here today is go at the high level, obviously. So you list them, and then you ask in the team some trigger questions, again, from Strategizer. I just high level here, what's too costly for the customer? What are they feeling bad about? What's underperforming? What difficulty on the day-to-day are they experiencing? What risks are they trying to avoid? And, you know, the famous question, what keeps them up at night, right? So these are trigger questions you will share with the team, and then you go in brainstorming, very quickly brainstorming. Usually it would take you an hour, 90 minutes, and you would do that for the pains, and then you would do that for the gains, right? And those are PDFs available that you can find on the Strategizer website or on Google Doc. If you Google search, if you don't know how to get them, I will send them to you. So here on the gains, what quality level are they trying to achieve? What about customer experience? What delights the customers? How do we make our job easier? What social consequences are they desiring, et cetera, et cetera. So usually in your team, it'll be easier to do the pains because we know the customer pains. The gains is what you're trying to achieve, and it could be like revenue increase. It could be increasing customer satisfaction. It will be boost the level of loyalty that we have with customers. So don't forget the gains. So you do a brainstorming, everybody works together, and then you list them, pains and gains, and you rate them. And then using the strategizer method, again, you look at how important is it for the customer? How tangible is it? Is it like real or is it a little fuzzy? How unsatisfied is it? Is it a big pain or gain that has not been resolved yet? And then is there willingness to pay for it, right? So you go line by line, and obviously you rate 1 to 10, and here is an average. You could see an example here where people actually give the average. We all voted together. Now, key points down there, always start with a verb and make sure the wording is customer focused. Remember what I said at the beginning, it's not internally focused, it's customer focused. And then you need to make sure the right people give you the score. And here you have the ranking. You have the ranking of the top pains and the top gains. That's the outcome of that first session. And that is critical for what we put in at the end of the process into the selling material. Because we turn these pains into challenges. We don't go in front of the customer and say, you have pain, Mr. Customer. No, we are facing challenges and we're here to help. So the process is, there is a template that I use, and this is part of the template. And we extract out of these, these scores that are 34, 33. And usually I'll focus a lot on willingness to pay, as you can imagine, because it's the relationship between willingness to pay and pricing power is quite significant. So then you go to step 4, where you identify your differentiators. Now that's a whole kind of worm altogether, because it's really hard to find the true differentiator. So what I usually do is you get into a session. So these so far we are usually 1 or 2 sessions into the sequence, the workshops, or the sprint. This is a dedicated session where versus the NBCA, the next best competitive alternative for a customer that we decided in the context or a segment, then we're going to extract our 2 differentiators. And usually I use the VIRO model, which is here on the screen. I borrowed that from the strategy world, but I adapted it, and the yes, no become 1 to 10. Is it valuable to the customer? Does that bring economic value in financial term? Is it rare? Are there 2 suppliers against me, or 15 competitors? Is it costly to imitate? Are you imitable very quickly? And then are you organized for success? Are you good at exploiting and executing your differentiation. So it looks like this. You have your differentiators right here, and then you're going to score them 1 to 10, and then have a score, right? So always keep the brainstorming in multifunctional group, and make sure the right people give you inputs on the score. So it needs to be multifunctional. Lots of discussion here for sure. And then the key here is one of my golden rules is it needs to be a 9 or a 10 in the value side. Because if there is no value and you have a high score, the customers are not going to be willing to pay. So my golden rule is 9 or 10 on the V and then a high score on the rest. Okay. And if you haven't seen my golden rule paper, there is actually a webinar that we did in the past. So you do the rating, and that takes a little bit of time. You might do that separately. So various different ways of doing this, but it's essential. Now, remember, we've done the pains and gains. Now we have the differentiators. So that's important to eventually map them. And that's what we do in step 5. So here you see on the left, my top pains and my top gains, right? That will be reinforced in the value proposition. Remember, we narrowed down to the top 3 or 4. So we went through the process of identifying them, using the language of the customer, sorting and ranking them to extract the top gains and pain. And then we do the same for the differentiator versus a competitor for a specific context. And then we map it. That differentiator matches that pain. And really you see here, how is it that you are matching the customer pains and gains with your current differentiators? So not only it shows you the power of your differentiator to address the customer pains and gains, but also you can identify some gaps. So you see down there, we have 2 differentiators that are very good, but we never communicated them to the customer, and they really don't address any of the critical pains and gains. Now they must, you may consider them as must-have to be in business, but at the end of the day, you could decide either they're not important and I'm going to use them for a different segment, or I stop investing in them, or I start promoting them to create that sense of pain, that to reassure the customer that I am here to solve an issue. But that mapping is quite important because sometimes we think we're differentiated, but we're not, because we're not fully addressing or understanding the customer pains and gains. Now you may say, this is really, why do I have to do all of this? Because that sequence eventually, all that, all these nuggets and the critical meat of what we're doing will end up in the value playbook. And that value playbook, if you do this in a multifunctional manner, will be very compelling. Because, and obviously if you validate it in the market, because that's what you do along the way. So remember, because it's a sprint, you have multiple sessions, then in between the sessions, you validate, you test, you refine, right? You ask maybe other opinions internally. So as you go through the steps, it becomes better and better and better. So step 6 is value modeling. I think all of you may do that already. If you're using the Leverage Point platform, then you are doing value modeling. And it's the representation of the EVE model, economic value estimation model. And in a nutshell, you have your reference value, which is the price of your direct competitor or NVCA. Then you have your positive differentiators that we identified in the previous steps, and you turn them into customer benefits, and then you quantify them as value drivers. Then you deduct cost unique to you. Now, this is not the price of, or your cost. It's the cost of doing business with you. You may have a need for more training, and maybe you deliver a little bit later than competition. These are what we call the negative differentiators. And then you extract your differentiation value, which is here, the difference between green and red, which can be added on top of the blue, right? And, I think it works very well. Lots of companies are starting to do more and more of this. I highly recommend to use a SaaS platform to do this, because manually it's fairly impossible, especially if you do this more and more and you start to industrialize that in your company. So, but remember the sequence. We went through pains and gains, the differentiators, the value mapping. Now we're in the value drivers side of the sequence. And this is typically 1 or 2 sessions. So I would, depending on how I work with teams, some teams are very good at it and autonomous. We do a validation session, and I'm here to kind of poke holes into their work. Sometimes they don't know how to do EVs, and we'll do 1 or 2 sessions, as part of the step 6. But it is for sure the most complicated step of the value sequence. Now, once you have all that's done, then you start assembling all the meat of your analysis, right? Then you look at your top gains and gains, your top 3 or 5 differentiators, the list of critical value drivers linked to the pains and gains, your value messages for each value drivers, and then you start looking for mega trends that the customer or the segments or the region are facing, because that's how we start the value messaging. Hey, this is what's happening in the world. And then at the same time, I ask usually the customer or the accounts to find dramatic statistics, because those at the end of the value material is where you create the wow. We sell to 100 countries, we have 1 million customers. All these very big numbers reinforce the fact that we are a solid player with an established footprint. So keynote down there, marketing must validate the outcome with customer interviews. Obviously it's a team effort. The outcome of all these steps must be a document that is all clean and formatted, right? So there's no ambiguity, there's no like messy, it's clean. It's clean, and it's using the word of the customer, and it's ready to be used. So I'm very, very pushy on that, because if you have a mess in your template, it's going to be very difficult for the other teams that are going to be on the receiving end of this to use it, right? To understand what you did. So clarity, cleanness, no typos, and if you have to put explanation, volunteer some explanation on the side, but one final document. And then at that stage of step 7, you start discussing with your communications team, and hopefully you have one, but usually you do, and you will start having a discussion of, here is what we've done, and we want to start using this in the playbooks that we want to do, right? And those usually will use the corporate branding, corporate templates, and that's how you plug in the way of doing communication and marketing, value-based marketing stuff. You start plugging in the content into these templates, and usually it's the communication teams that will help on that. And if you don't have one, you're it. So step 8 is about creating the value playbook, right? Some will call that the sales playbook. I like to call that the value playbook, because then when we do value-based selling training, then we use the value playbook. And then who does the value playbook is marketing and communications team. The salespeople do not do their own value playbook. Marketing is the R&D of sales. So marketing creates the value playbook with all the value tools that we talked about, using all the contents and the nuggets we extracted from the sprint. And then we start packaging it in the form of a digital playbook or a physical playbook that you can touch, or you could put that in digital seller or other sales enablement platform. This is, for the team to decide. And I've done all of it, creating a binder, spiral binder with all these value tools that people could walk around with. And I've used digital seller to automatically upload all these with iPad. So, this is where we go into sales enablement. So what's in the playbook? Sales presentations, for sure, with mega trends, challenges, the winning solution we offer, customer benefits, dramatic statistic. And you could see here we're using what we did. So the mega trends, maybe you have potential inflation, geopolitical risk, climate issues, you name it, cybersecurity, like disruption of supply chain. And those are the, introduction with the customer, and say, hey, what do you think about this mega trend? Then you say, well, typically customers like you have these challenges. You have a lot of waste, or you're facing potentially a lot of churn in your solution. What do you think? That's where we start getting into the value conversation. Then you go into, well, this is a winning solution with our critical differentiators. And by the way, they'll give you these benefits. This is where you would show, typically what we do with paints, we have these benefits. We quantify them. Maybe we give a range or a first level quantification in percentage. And then we say, and by the way, we are XYZ company and our footprint looks like this. We have a 28 billion in transaction that we manage. We have 158 oil rigs. We have, you name it. And those are very powerful because you do a slide of dramatic statistics. It's impactful. So that's a sales press, right? And you could use that into maybe a training. Obviously, you have usually a 15 slide presentation, a standard presentation for the specific scope that we defined. And then we have maybe a longer presentation for sales training internally, where you put a lot more information on it. And then you'll use a sales press into value-based selling training. Number two, data sheets with the customer benefits to quantify value drivers, success stories, and disclaimers. Obviously, you need to have disclaimers. These could be internal or it could be external. And usually, most companies will have external, like data sheets or application data sheets. What we're talking about here is adding sections with customer benefits and maybe a block with a value case study. The customer XYZ used our solution, and then in this context, we generated 2 points of improvement in yield or in productivity, et cetera, et cetera. Now, to be validated by legal and the right disclaimer. Because sometimes your legal team will not allow you to do these claims, so you have to make sure you check that. So then on the website, you will put your why us, the wow differentiators, some value stories in the form of PDF or not, dramatic statistics. And if you go see some of the companies that do this, the SKF of the world or other companies, they have value data sheets, value stories, and then maybe some competitive mapping to show how good we are. Remember, all that stuff is integrated into what's called a value campaign, right? We have in the customer proposals themselves, if you're responding to RFPs or if you have strategic account you're pitching to, then you will have your winning themes, against challenges and differentiators, quantify value drivers. You could put that in the executive summary of your proposal as why us and the winning themes, responding to what we call the customer hot buttons. But it's a standard template that you plug in your proposal, and it all talks about value. And at the end, in your sales enablement plans, you do a basic training, you have a sales presentation that can be customized. So let's say you have if you do something for the African continent, then you will have a generic presentation, and then they may add specific slides for South Africa or that type of government entity or that type of customer. So you need to allow the salespeople to customize your presentation. You will have value assets that are used, and then you'll start obviously discussing pains and in conversations and value discovery guidelines. So those are documents, scripts that you prepare on how to start value conversation, how to rebound on customers' questions or objections. And then the value discovery is really used at the beginning of the relationship in pre-sales or early on to really understand what are their pains and gains, and then that's what you would plug in the value props. So I know I'm throwing a lot of content at you, but I want to focus on the sequence, and I'm going a little high in the steps, but I really want to reinforce the need for integration, the need for sequencing the work, the need for the use of customer language and vocabulary in all of this. And then at the end of the process, when we get later in the steps, is everything needs to be branded the same way. It needs to be systematic, repetitive, and well designed. And I insist on that. This is why we use the corporate communication teams or some marketing, marcom people, so that we have beautiful templates and we use the same. So if you have 20 product managers, they all use the same format, branding, words, challenges, mega trends. So it's not optional, it's required. And you may have that already. You will have for sure the brand guidelines with corporate templates to use, and that's great. and then we're going to adopt that in our value-based selling and in the value playbook. So these documents are uploaded in SharePoint, or they are in the sales enablement platform. They are certainly in the training programs. And then they can be, you give the opportunity for salespeople or account managers to modify them. And sometimes what I've done is created the optional slides with them on, let's do that for that type of buyer, maybe different players in the ecosystem, different stakeholders. You just add slides, and then they complete their own presentation. And at the end, it accelerates sales enablement and the ability for salespeople to go faster in front of account and have the right information. The last thing you want is your salespeople doing presentations all day, right? And let them do that on their own. So you want to feed the extremely important content into these activities of selling. So that's step 8, and then you train. So I have whole courses on value-based selling training, and at the end of the day, you're going to do that using the value playbook. You are going to blend the methods. And I always recommend 7 to 10 touch points over 90 to 120 days. Now, the last thing you want to do is put them in a room for 2 hours and do PowerPoint only for 2 hours, because they're only going to retain 10%. So you want to blend the type of training and then some touch point over a period of time. And here you will do value-based virtual training, in-person training, role-playing, shadowing. So the goal today is not to really go deep into value-based selling, but this is really how you use the playbook. And you'll train them on each tool in the playbook, and then you're going to allow them to role-play, right? So maybe you put 3 people around the table and in an environment of training, and you start the value conversation. You ask them to start the value conversation. Maybe you put other people and you do a value discovery with them using the questions that you prepared. Maybe you deliver a value prop in the format of a presentation. So all this is about role-playing and really coaching during the value-based selling process. And last, also, all these things in value-based selling, the role-playing is critical. I do a lot of role-playing, and that's the best way to infiltrate the mind of salespeople. So you role-play on these 8 items right here, even remote value selling. If you can't travel, how do you do that on Zoom or Teams on the phone? And the more role-playing you do in value-based selling with the value playbook, the higher the confidence in the assimilation. So keep that in mind, because it's essential. The whole goal that we want to have here is make sure they embraced the messages, all the contents were created around pains, gains, and value drivers, and they assimilate it. So it becomes natural for them to use it. It may take a little while, but at the end of the day, the more role-playing, the more coaching in that role-playing, the better it is for their confidence. So step 10 is, now you've done it for a product range, a solution, a region, and then you repeat the process, right? So you could do it in a way, and I've done it where I have 12 teams in parallel doing this over 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Imagine the impact of this. Now, obviously, the marketing team is involved, the pricing team is involved, the sales team is involved, but it's a campaign. It's a 90-day campaign where we do the whole sequence, and then we all come up with the right presentation, a value playbook by region, by segment. So it's super powerful, and the cost is reasonable because it's done, and then you maintain it, and that will be typically the role of marketing managers and product managers. So systematic, repeatable, customer-centric, structured, and actionable, which means they have to use it. They have to use it in sales presentation, in proposals. So really, at the end of the day, we got to do all the work, create that beautiful value playbook, and they have to use it. And the way that we do this, it's part of the sales process. We integrate that in the commercial process. And I think I repeated that already a dozen times. You need to put yourself in the shoes of the customer, and everything needs to be in the language of customers. And you will be surprised how many people don't know how to speak the language of customers. And it's normal. Some, some functions are not customer facing, but even I've seen sales team not able to do value prop and understanding the pain in the language of your customer. So that's good practice. So I think we have, this is the end of my presentation. I think, Nick, we can open up for questions here and see if there is some interest from the audience to ask.
We can do that. Thank you, Stephan. I think what Stephan just shared was not only an actionable framework or a way that value content can help improve commercial performance, but also an actionable framework for rolling that out. And you need both to kind of capture the benefits of value management and value selling success. So there's still plenty of time to enter your questions in the right-hand panel on your screen. We'll be getting those in about 5 minutes. But before that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Brian Hannon, who is VP of Sales here at Leverage Point. And he's going to be sharing how you can go through the process of creating and rolling out this value content within the Leverage Point platform. So Brian, I think the floor is yours once I give you control. So take it away.
Great. Thanks, Nick. And thank you, Stephan. I think we'll talk a little bit in these few minutes just about kind of more about what we're doing at Leverage Point around AI. And, Stephan's an expert at helping his customers sort of go through insightful questions about their offerings and making sure those questions are customer centric. So really asking the right questions is always step one around value. And I think if you think back to his presentation just now, there's many sort of really good questions to be asking if you're a product manager about your product, about how your customers are using it, how they're getting value from it. What we're doing now is really thinking about how AI can help answer some or many of those questions, and really what quality of answers it will give, and can that be helpful in accelerating some of the work that product managers or even all the way through marketing and salespeople are doing to create these kind of tools that Stephan has been talking about. And so if we use one of our value stories as sort of an example, this is an example of a value story, a demo example that we use a lot. Fictitious company called Valorum and a fictitious offering, which is a high-end air conditioning system. If you look at the elements of this presentation as I walk through, I can kind of highlight areas that AI can certainly help in terms of populating a framework that would allow people to create these tools much quicker. So if we think about putting into AI the name of our product, the name of our company, 2 or 3 or 4 top key areas of benefit that we think our offering provides, we can have a framework set up to ask AI lots of questions around those very basic inputs. And for example, AI can choose images for a presentation based on the topics that we're talking about and give us options, allow us to very quickly choose between, image A, B, or C. It can populate a framework with the name of the offering, the name of the company. It can infer the color scheme from the company's website automatically, so that a presentation not only has the company's logo, but it has the color scheme automatically as well. And then if we use our existing framework, which some of you may have seen before, where we break a value story into chapters about, what is the offering itself? Well, this can be generated from AI as well. Now, we're never saying, even at this point, that AI is going to be 100% correct all the time. But what we're finding is that it's directionally correct most of the time. And while we would never say, go build an airplane based on the specs that we're generating from AI, when you're telling a story, if AI can get you to 80% of the way there, and then your job is really to then change the details, edit, make sure it's correct, it actually reduces the amount of work, and it hopefully reduces the wall that we see with a lot of product managers in terms of just getting started. And I think that's part of what we're seeing is the biggest benefit here. So if we think a little bit more about AI being able to generate the value drivers of a particular value model, and Stephan referred to the value model earlier, it can populate the value model. The value model can then be used to populate a value story like this. This case is AI could generate the three key areas of value, and it could describe them for us. And again, maybe it generates 6, and we choose the 3 that make the most sense. When it generates a value driver, it can actually generate the math. And the math is a set of inputs and an output. Those inputs tend to be variables that relate to your, in this case, your company's operation. So how big is your facility? If you're going to be measuring how much energy you're saving, you need to know, the size of the operation itself, and then you need to know some other details. So those can be populated in terms of value story assumptions that you might be asking your customer to validate for you. And so here we have an editable value story, but these assumptions can be driven from AI, and we can make sure AI is asking or answering questions in the form of a customer. So their AI is in that viewpoint, and it can also talk in the form of specific verticals. So we can tell AI, hey, we're in this vertical. We want answers to this question, how a customer would see the solution being used in this particular way. So as usual, in these stories, we focus on individual value drivers. We allow the salesperson, if they're presenting this, to talk about how a particular value driver was quantified. We allow them to show the math if that's something they want to do. Here we give like an overview of all 3, and then we would go through each value driver individually and allow the math to be edited. Again, this can be generated, the calculations can be generated either manually, or today we're starting to see from AI. We're building a lot of this capability internally right now, and we'll be releasing this next year to our customers. Each of these value drivers is unique, and then we have a set of summary slides which we'll go through. And again, we can set these frameworks up so the data is being fed automatically, or the data is being fed by the user. We certainly will have it set up where the user can edit the data very easily. So if AI makes suggestions that just don't make sense, well, those can be changed based on the user's knowledge or a team's knowledge if they're doing this as a workshop. So that's about it. A little bit different discussion in terms of what we're doing, and we're hoping to continue to be talking about how AI will drive this forward, and what we can offer if folks on here want a value story of their own. As I mentioned earlier, we just need a few suggestions. So we can send you an email with, say, 4 to 5 questions about your offering. We'll come back with a value story that looks similar to this, but is very specific to you. And happy to share that with you in a follow-up call. So I think we're going to make that offer at the end of this in some way. And with that, I'll pass this back to you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And as Brian mentioned, for those of you interested in learning more about leverage point value stories, to assist in just general content creation, creating value stories, please let us know in the exit survey. And as Brian mentioned, we're also weaving in generative AI within our product offering in the coming months. So as Brian alluded to, you can get a preview of what that might look like in your instance. Just indicate as such in the exit survey, and we'll be in touch. So I think it's time for the Q&A. So Stephan, I think I got you, and I got a couple good questions. You ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we got this is a long one, so I'll try to distill it. But in a case where the person asking the question has 2 types of models, one that model's just to overall value delivered to justify the purchase, and then the other one is to justify the premium compared to a alternative offering. What are your thoughts on using both, using one over the other, and any specific situations where you've seen either or be more effective?
Well, I mean, justifying a purchase and justifying a premium obviously are two different things. You know, I certainly would do a dedicated value model that, you know, internally you calculate your value pool and what your position is going to be on the value pool. And then that feeds into maybe a bigger business case where you justify the purchase, which, you know, may be against competitors or not, because now you may be entering a new account or, you know, proposing something that's radically new, or, but then you explain the business case, you know, for it, and inside you have a quantified value prop, quantified value model. So I would say two different outcome, two different preparation, one feed into the other, and I think it's separate works, because a value model is a value model, as you all know, but the rest is a bigger business case with a story, right?
Yep, and that makes sense. And we talk with customers all the time, and I think the only thing I would add is that the alternative, there's always an alternative, even if it's just doing nothing. So hopefully that answers that question. Thank you for that. What's one on? Here's one on just keeping the effort alive. So we've had a lot of successful customers, you know, build and maintain these initiatives, whether it's a 10-step process or something similar, and other ones where it kind of peters out. So what are your recommendations? Is it something where dedicated resources are necessary? How are companies coping in your eyes?
So usually, so let's assume you're starting with a base, you have some documents, and, you know, it's going to be very product manager dependent or solution manager dependent. You're going to take this, you're going to refresh it through the process. And, you know, I know it's 10 step, but it's really fast. I mean, some of them are, you know, and you could do it in 2 weeks if you want to, if you already have existing. Then, you know, someone needs to own this, you know, and usually it's a marketing manager, a product manager, a solution manager. And what I usually recommend is refresh every 6 months. At least, you know, when you have to do a marketing plan, then you would, you know, refresh all these for the next cycle. Now, if you are in a very dynamic environment, then it's going to be monthly or quarterly. But if you're in a traditional, you know, environment where the technology is not obsolete very quickly, or there is stability, then every year, like when you refresh your segmentation, you refresh your value playbook. And certainly it cannot be static. So it's you know, it's kind of a race here. Someone needs to be responsible and accountable, and then you consult the whole team, and, you know, so it's a living document, really. And Nick, you've seen me talk about dynamic value-based pricing. Right now, everything needs to be dynamic in a way that, you know, you could be very quickly obsolete and outdated.
Mm-hmm. No, that's something we talk about with you know, the companies we work with all the time. And this one actually is kind of a related question, and I think thematically it pairs well. Is how does sales usually respond, especially if it's the first time that they've interacted or worked with this kind of content?
Well, sales is in the process. So so, you know, they have buy-in, they have skin in the game, and they're going to validate it. And so, you know, I certainly do not recommend to do all of this without sales, you know. So, you know, if you have a product, if you're a product manager or a regional manager, you obviously will pick a representative or two from sales, and then they need to go out and socialize it with other salespeople. And so it's a constant back and forth in the sprint. That's what I like to do, sprints, because in between the activities, the mini working sessions, you ask them, go and check with other people. Go talk to the supply chain people. So the product manager will go talk to the quality person and say, what do you think, right? At the same time, the salespeople will go out and have chats with customers. And I've seen that in boot camps where you had teams working together, and the sales guys were making calls to end users and distributors and validating, asking questions real time. And I started using Gen AI about 18 months ago in value modeling sessions. So imagine the power of AI to be able to do a lot of that.
Yeah, it's I think the first and most obvious use case is in ideation, creativity, getting the juices flowing, and I think it's helped a lot of us accelerate our efforts in the value space. I think we have time for one more quick one. What's the this one actually is really interesting that came in. I'm going to pivot and go with this one. So if you it's sustainability. So sustainability is kind of a big topic. In terms of segmenting between different markets where there might be more or less salience in terms of sustainability messaging or environmental awareness, how do you typically respond in terms of designing a value proposition?
Well, it's like you would do for any other products or innovation or service. It's just the big story, the big value prop is about sustainability. So a lot of the process and tools and concepts are the same. We just focus on sustainability, assuming that we've done a great segmentation. Because usually, you have potentially 5-10% of your customers that are sensitive to that topic. So, for them, the value prop will be different. The discovery process will be different. What sales, do, it's going to be different. So it's a matter of establishing the ICP and the target that you want to reach, and then you create your value assets and the tools, and then follow the process. And that's a key point. One size doesn't fit all. There's always going to be a need for segmentation. So, one point that you, just to switch gear, that you guys made is the full integration of all these with AI. But imagine that integration going a step further now, going into CRM and going into your price optimization software, in your price management software. And this is something that Zillion is looking at. How do we get the work that you guys do and all that sequence and feeds it into some of the engines, because you don't want to lose the essence of your work, which is a premium and a justification of the premium. So eventually, we're going to have a fully integrated suite of value with all a tech stack that speak to each other. And I'm excited about this, connecting all the software suites, because that's the future. Empowered by AI,
yeah,
we're unstoppable.
Yeah, I think I can speak for both of us for saying it's going to be an exciting coming years in this space. So stay tuned, and we're going to be talking about a lot more of this in the future. Which brings me to our next webinar. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us across the calendar year. This 2024 series has been one of the best ones yet. And before you go, I'd just like to invite everyone to pre-register for our next webinar, which is in January. Todd Selgrove is going to be back. He's going to be talking about strategies to capture B2B innovation value through customer collaboration. So this is a really good evergreen topic. It's going to be a great way to start off the fiscal year for many of you. So if you're interested, please pre-register in the exit survey. And then finally, if you'd like to join our regular community of webinar participants, let us know. We can just sign you up for the 2025 series. So you just have to click a box and don't have to swim through all the emails I'll be sending you. So you can do that in the exit survey as well. And that is it for us today. So big thank you for Stephan for helping us close out the year on with a great presentation. For those of us here at Leverage Point, have a great holiday season, end of year, whatever you celebrate, and take care, and we'll see you in 2025.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.